Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Magnuson. I am a librarian with Hoag Library in Albion, New York, and I am also a mentor for the Orleans Digital Literacy Initiative. And this little discussion slash instructional meeting is a collaboration between the two organizations. I want to thank Katie Leach for inviting me to do this from the Cornell Cooperative Extension and the director of the ODLI program. So thank you, Katie, and welcome. And today I'm going to talk, give a little bit of an intro about ID.me, or it's spelled ID.me, but I've also heard it referred to as ID and me. So if people come in your organization asking about ID and me, this is what they're talking about. Technically, it's just ID me. And the most common question I have from library patrons is, why are they doing this? Why did they change this? It used to be so much easier. Why are they making people go through this whole rigmarole process just to get unemployment or for employment verification? And the answer is quite simply insurance fraud. COVID-19, particularly the beginning of the pandemic, when people were applying for partial or full unemployment, there was a massive push of unemployment fraud, which a lot of people, including myself, were victims of, including people who are very careful. There was kind of an organized, or it's believed to be at least, an organized crime ring was going around using people's information to create false claims in people's names, whether or not they were unemployed. So as a way to combat that, they have introduced this ID.me, which is a private organization. It's a private company that several different states and other organizations have contracted to provide identity verification so that people, they can be a lot more safe in regards to who they're giving out benefits to or who they're hiring. As for why they don't do unemployment in person as much at the local unemployment offices, that's a question I don't even want to get into. But unfortunately, this is a reality. They are using this system, for the foreseeable future to provide employment verification and unemployment verification for New York State through the Department of Labor. And I'm here to try and help talk about some of the most common issues that I see patrons or library patrons having. I should mention that a part of the reason I'm doing this training is because New York State is often directing people to local libraries and informational nonprofit organizations for help with the ID.me platform, rather than having their staff help people one-on-one due to, I'm sure, cost concerns and such. So if you are a librarian, it's very likely you're going to have a library patron coming to you with questions about it. First off, I'm going to talk about what you're going to need. And what you're going to need is, first of all, a device with online capability, either a smartphone with a camera or a laptop computer or a tablet. I personally would recommend most of all using both a smartphone and a laptop if possible, for reasons that I will get into later. But you can just technically use a smartphone if need be. It can be a pain in the neck, but we'll go through that. You will need, the patron rather, the person who you are helping will need identity documents available. If they are applying for unemployment, the only document they should need is a New York State driver's license, a New York State learner's permit, or a New York State identification card, one of the three. And you will need to take a photo front and back of that document at some point during the process. If, however, they are going for state employment, which I've had a couple of people do, I had a case where there's a, I believe it was, I'm trying to think, I want to say in Genesee County that they were doing an employment drive for a state program, and there was a gentleman who needed help applying for a job. And in that case, you'll need not only a photo ID, but also other documents according to the I-9 list of acceptable documents, which I'm going to send a link to that form in the chat. But if you look up the I-9 instructions, it's a federal form, Department of Homeland Security. You can find it on uscis.gov. And they should have a long list of documents that are acceptable, and they will need to bring either two, I believe, A-list documents, or one A-list document and two B-list documents. In most cases, in both cases that I have had to help people, they brought their driver's license, their social security card, and an insurance card. But I believe birth certificate is also a common one. But there's lots of other documents that can be used, and I'm going to send that in the chat so people can peruse that if they so choose. In addition to those two things, they are going to need either to create an account for both ny.gov and to create an account for id.me. And if they've already created an account, they will need their username and password for both. And this is where you're going to run into a lot of hurdles, because a lot of people will already have a New York State ID, but they won't remember how to access it. They won't remember their password. They won't remember their email. There's someone I know who is watching right now who had a case where the person had an account and no longer had access to the phone number they used to create the account, no longer had access to the username, and no longer had access to their password. And they were, also didn't have access to the email they created the account with. So they were kind of dead in the water until they had to contact New York State, which we'll go into again as a potential. I'm going to go over a list of potential problems that will arise. But those are the big things that you will need going in. Oh, someone else in here. For the most part, it is going through the, I'm also going to share some links to ID&me that they have available for assistance. But for the most part, the steps that you go through the person you're helping will be straightforward. At least they'll seem straightforward. But a lot of the time, the issues that I have are that things just plain old don't work. And I'm going to talk about the most common issues at this point that I've had working with people with ID&me. First of all, they don't have a device that works. They have a flip phone that has a camera and no browser capabilities, so they can't actually access the website through that, and don't have they don't have a computer that has a webcam available. In that case, if you have, what I would recommend is if you have a device, a laptop that's available for public use, or a computer that's available for a lab computer that's available for public use that has a webcam installed, that's probably the best option. If they have a tablet that they can use, that's also a possibility. Or if you have a tablet that you can allow them to use. But regardless, they're going to need some sort of device that will be compatible, be it a laptop with a webcam or a touch screen based device with a camera. The camera is most important due to, even though you can upload pre-taken photos of documents, there is a live facial scan that will occur, which the camera is used for. So if they don't have some sort of camera-based device, either you'll have to try and provide them one, or they'll have to acquire one, unfortunately, which is not great. The second issue that I've talked about is they don't have access to their ny.gov account. They do have, when you go to ny.gov, if they have never applied for unemployment, they still may have a ny.gov account because it's used for a variety of things, including for teaching, if you're going for your teaching degree, any sort of state employment. Actually, if you go to, let me share my screen here.
The health insurance exchange, if they've ever applied for health insurance like
Yes.
Medicaid, Medicare.
If we go to services, I'm
Department
gonna share my
of Motor
screen here.
Vehicles, if you do anything online with them, I think it's through the New York ID too.
Here we go. So any of these services that you can see here on the screen that are available, those all require a ny.gov account, and they are all linked, believe it or not. So if you've created an account for one of these things, chances are you've already got one, and that's the account that you want to use. You're not supposed, like, and a lot of times they'll try to put in their email and it'll say that they already have an account. They're like, I've never applied for unemployment. I don't have an account. Unfortunately, they probably do, and they use it for something else. So in that case, you'll want to go try and follow the steps to reset the password. And to do that, they will need access to either the email that they use to create the account or the phone that they use to create the account. If they do not have access to either of those, they are going to have to call 1-800, I'm going to type this in the chat, 1-800-833-3000. And that is the New York State, or the ny.gov helpline. It's not fun. Chances are they're going to be on the phone for quite a while, holding, and have to go through a whole lot of rigmarole to prove their identity that way. But unfortunately, that's what they're going to have to do, because creating another ny.gov account generally does not, either doesn't go well, or it something will happen down the road where you'll need access to the first account. Another issue is they need an account for ID.me. And a lot of people that I've tried to help have already tried to create an account. And then when they come to help or come to ask you for help, they'll have already forgotten what they used to log in to that account. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that ID.me's account is completely separate from the ny.gov account. They link certain aspects of it to be able to verify things, but they do need a separate account for each. And ID.me has their own support and their own password reset available. So if they've already started to create that ID.me account, you will need to help them with that as well. The biggest issue I have, though, outside of all the, actually, I would say the biggest issue, period, is while they're going through the process and they are trying to take the pictures of the documents that they need, there are two options that you have when it comes to uploading the pictures. You can either have already taken pictures and upload them using your device. Usually that's the option that you use when you're using like a laptop or a computer. Or if you have a smartphone, even if you're using it on a laptop, there is an option to send a link to your phone, which opens up it's not quite an app, it is a browser application that allows them to take the photos in real time of the documents. This sounds great in theory, and it's what a lot of people end up using or being forced to use, because they usually only have the smartphone available. The problem is, in most cases where I've had to help people with this, no matter how straight I try to take the picture for them, or if they try to take the picture, the service will not accept it. And it just keeps giving errors after errors. And after a certain number of errors, it will stop accepting them altogether. And it'll say that they have to do a video chat with an ID.me representative. And if that happens, thankfully, on the plus side is, if that happens, they're usually very helpful. The problem is, they will usually have to wait for at least an hour, if not more. I actually had a patron that was sitting there waiting at his computer for an hour and a half, and then the library closed, and he had to come in the next day for help. So when it does happen, they will have a person face-to-face with them, and they will ask the person needing assistance to hold up the documents in front of the camera one by one and flip them over. And then they will ask if they're masked to take their mask off so that they can see the face and compare the picture on the document with the face. But after that's done, they will usually just, okay, that's it. And from there, You know, things are fairly easy peasy, but it can be a pain in the neck to wait, and it's a lot easier, well, a lot less rigmarole for, especially if you're trying to help a person, to just try and get that done on the first try. So if you can choose the option to upload the documents from the computer, I highly recommend doing so, because the browser app on the phone is very spotty and very inconsistent in how it accepts photos for those documents.
Can I add something, Mike?
Sure, go ahead.
So Danielle could talk about this too. So if you, at the library, if you have a scanner and you scan those documents, it's better and clearer than a picture. And that's actually what ended up working for us. I know that some documents, I think, Danielle, were accepted, but what we ended up doing to stop that overhead glare from the lights, and I think we put it underneath a computer desk with a blank piece of paper, because I think the carpeting was causing a problem with that, and it was literally crouched under a computer desk to stop the overhead light. We used a flash or something to make the good light still, and then that was even, and we, you know, but it was a big deal. And I think, Danielle, for the next set of pictures, we just did the scan, and it, yeah, right, it worked perfect that time.
Yeah, I think the picture of his ID, it wouldn't accept PDF, so it had to be a JPEG, if I remember.
They accept PDFs. I don't know.
I have had,
Their
yeah,
systems
I've done
seem to,
PDFs as well.
sometimes it would seem to say one thing, like you have to start over, and then suddenly it didn't make us start over, and it said, actually, you're set, but we weren't. So I would say just roll with those punches.
Sarah
don't know.
just added in the chat that you can scan into Google Drive with your phone. So that is also an option. Sarah, thank you for that. I appreciate it. 'Cause,
Yeah, and iPhones
if
have
the
the
phone is,
capability with notes to scan as well. So
That's
I don't
true.
know if Android has an innate one, but you can get scanning apps
yeah,
for Androids.
the biggest thing I can say is just if you have the option, and even if they have, that's a good option for if they only have a phone. If you can have an option to scan the document ahead of time and use the upload option rather than the in-browser app taking the photo, do it, because it's, I think I've had a very bad experience with that in-browser app on the phone trying to take pictures. You can use, I've used white, you know, putting it on a white piece of paper. I've done putting it on a black background, putting it on a wood background. I've done it at various angles, trying to be as straight as possible, and it's, you know, as close, as far away, it still doesn't take it. And then after so many different tries, they just default to, oh, time to call a representative. You hope you're ready to hold for an hour and a half. So yeah, I can't stress that enough. If you can scan the documents before you, or take a photo of them beforehand, do so. And yeah, I'm hoping that that's something that they'll fix in the future, but right now it is not a consistent way to do things. Another issue that I often come across is the facial scan. When it comes point in time to do the face scan, that has to be done. That's not something, unfortunately, that you can do ahead of time. It'll usually either it'll ask you to take a selfie in real time, or it'll ask you to sit in front of a webcam. And with the selfie option, they'll just keep saying it's not a good selfie. And with the webcam option, it'll show like it's trying to scan the face, and it'll have like a little circle to try and put your head in. And it is like, it'll take forever for it to actually start a countdown to take the picture. When you finally get to just that sweet spot, it'll go 3, 2, and then stop and say nope, and it'll restart and try to focus again. So the best thing I can do is just keep playing around with the face, with your camera, or have them keep, try and direct them. And that's the other issue, is a lot of times the person that you're trying to work with, they'll say, oh, just move your head a little bit over to the right, and then they'll move it over to the left. Or they'll do the opposite of what you're trying to do. Just be patient, and just try and get them in the right position. And as soon as you see that the screen kind of turn green, just have them hold it, just like hold and don't have them move. And eventually it will get there. Again, if you can use the webcam option, I highly recommend that over the selfie option, because I've had it with selfies numerous times. So with the facial scan, it's a little easier to, even with the pain in the neck of having to get it in that sweet spot, it'll at least, usually work out after the fact. Once it gets in that sweet spot, that's it. It'll work.
Can I add something else to that, Mike? I feel
Sure.
like we have to think like influencers here, and we're all considering our lighting and whatnot, but really that really does affect it. Like if they have a really strong backlight, like right now I do not have a wall behind me.
Mhm.
That's fantastic. But if they're behind with a window and the light is shining through, the camera's going to have a hard time seeing. So it might just be like a little bit of preparation ahead of time before you actually start, and just think like with the camera before you click that link and start it, to make sure that they're in a good spot and good lighting and that sort of thing.
Yes, that's a good point. Another thing too is you want to make sure that whatever they were wearing, or not whatever, if they, when it comes to putting things on their face, or if they're wearing a hat or a bandana, when they're taking their picture, they will want to take those off, depending on what they had where in their photo identification, because they're going to get the big reason they do the facial scan is to compare it with the photo on their ID. So if they're wearing a hat, when they come in and they weren't wearing it on their driver's license, they're going to need to take the hat off. Same thing with any other facial adornments. And
they asked to take off glasses. I would treat it just like a passport photo, like
Yeah.
no glasses, no hat, no scarf. Cover take that hair if it's a lady, and like push it back behind the ears. You need to see the full ear,
Yeah.
just like you're taking that passport photo to go abroad.
Yeah, and also, especially now with the mask, just make sure that you step away when they're taking the photo, but they will need to take the mask off, and then they can put it back on afterwards if you're still, if you have a mask mandate. That's one thing that as much as I wish we could have them leave that on, it's not going to work. Hold on. Sarah also brought up that there are clip-on ring lights for phones that a library might consider. That's actually a really good option. That could help for lighting, especially if they're using, their smartphone. Clip that on, and yeah, actually, we should probably look into that, because that would be pretty helpful. So once again, thank you, Sarah. Let me think. And then the last thing I mentioned as in the common complaints, which I've already talked a little bit about, is when you've already had so many failures and they force you to call representative. As I mentioned, when you finally are able to get a representative on, it's usually pretty easy by that point, because again, they just usually ask you to hold up the documents to the camera so that they can take a screenshot or look at it and verify in person. And then they'll ask, to see your face so that they can do the face scan. But the biggest issue with that is getting someone on the call. And with a lot of people that I've been working with, they don't feel comfortable sitting there and waiting, by themselves for this call, because by the time, I've dealt with at least one person who had rather severe anxiety when it came to technology issues, where they needed they wanted somebody to sit there and help them and walk them through. They wanted me to sit there next to them and make sure that they were doing okay. And that's a huge time commitment when you're trying to get other work done, and you need to sit next to this person trying to make sure that they get on the call okay. So that if it's something that you want to try to avoid, but if it's unavoidable, then just try to reassure the person that you're working with that it'll be okay, that the person that's on the live chat will be able to help them, and it'll be very easy. Just try to do your best to reassure them, because in my experience, I've had to do it twice with the video call. They have been very helpful. The biggest issue is just having to wait for somebody. Okay, from here on out, I am going to open up the floor, and if you want to talk about issues or concerns that you've had, anything I haven't covered or that I've forgotten about regarding ID.me, you know, I'm going to open up the floor and we can have a little discussion about what other issues you've been having and how we can help prepare for those and solve those.
I'm going to put some resources in the chat
Oh
box,
yeah,
everybody.
I need to do that too.
Or do you want me to stop doing it if you're going to
Oh,
do
no,
it?
no, you
Or-
go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll just put
try
the few I have, and then you can add more if there are more that I forgot.
Sure. I think I did do the I-9 form in there, the I-9 instructions rather. For
This is a
identity
mixture of
document.
things from the Department of Labor and from ID.me. And the advice is that if you do need to reach out to ID.me to get that support from them, to do it through the chat. And I included that help.id.me and to click on the link. They have that little button at the top right and also at the lower right to do the chat rather than call.
Okay. Yeah, they do have the ID.me has the chat support. Ny.gov, I think you have to call on the phone, unfortunately.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I've been running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I've been poking around at the links and looking at stuff. Is it possible? Could you give me the too long didn't read version? Because I missed the first 15 minutes.
Oh, sure. Basically, the reason I put the
Sorry.
I-9 in there in the document is because talking about common issues, like what people will need in regards to using the ID.me or helping people with ID.me. One thing that people will need is documents for verifying their identity. And while most of the cases that people bring to me have been for unemployment, which for unemployment verification, all they will need is a copy of either their driver's license, learner's permit, or New York State identification. And they just
So
need
this
to
ID.me is a separate company that works with the New York State government.
Sorry, yeah, I'm
sorry, it's all veteran owned.
No,
that's
okay.
I'm sorry. Like I said,
you're
it's
fine.
my fault. I missed it. I apologize.
It's okay. Yes, ID.me is a separate company that has been contracted by not only New York State's Department of Labor, but also several other state governments and other private organizations for identity verification. And the reason, and that's what I started my presentation with, is the biggest question I get from any patron, every single patron that's coming is, why did they do this? This used to be so much easier. Why are they torturing us with this? And the whole reason is insurance fraud. Last year with COVID-19, they used to just have you send them, through ny.gov's website. You would send them a copy of your the back and front of your ID, and that was pretty much it. And fraudsters used that to create, and they used information from people to create fake insurance claims for tons of people. I got affected by that. I got a mailing saying, "Hey, you never finished filing for unemployment," and I was like, I never filed for unemployment. Had to call I had to call New York State. I had to call the Social Security Administration. I had to put a credit alert on my line of credit. It was not good. And people, I've been told that people have, there were people who had little kids who were apparently filing for unemployment. So to put a kibosh on that, New York State partnered with ID.me to verify identity. And unfortunately for the people who are not tech savvy, it has been a nightmare for them. So I've had, and in a lot of cases, actually now throughout the state, libraries are being asked to help with, helping people with tech support, because we're just, the New York State Department of Labor is most often referring them to libraries or other informational nonprofits for help, because they don't, for cost reasons, I'm assuming. So that is why we are in this predicament, why this ID.me is being used. And for New York State's Department of Labor, they are mostly using it not only for unemployment verification, but also state employment verification. So I have had at least one instance specifically where I had a person who was applying for employment rather than unemployment. And in that case, they didn't have to just scan their photo ID. They had to bring in several different types of identification. So that is why I sent in the, or I put in the beginning of the chat, the I-9 instructions, because if they're applying for employment, they will need not only their photo ID, but also other documents that are on the A and B lists, according to the I-9. In most cases, that's usually a birth certificate, a social security card, or an insurance card. But there are other documents that are possible to use. Also, I should mention, instead of the New York State ID, learner's permit or driver's license, I believe a passport is also acceptable, but I have not had anyone bring in a passport before. But that should be, I think, one that people can use, at least for the employment side.
It's for the department, for the unemployment as well.
Unemployment.
And if someone has tried to get through that system and they're really struggling and they're coming to you, the more they struggle with it, maybe more ID.me is going to be concerned that it might be some sort of fraud, like they're using an expired driver's license or something like that. And so then ID.me will start asking for other documents and giving other lists of possibilities in addition to the main ones that they ask for. So it could be something further like bank statements or something like that, some sort of financial instrument. So I guess it would just be a matter of just taking as it comes, I guess, and trying to have that patience.
Yeah.
And like Mike said, just encouraging people, like, you know, they are making progress and they are going to get there in the end.
Yeah. Unfortunately, what I really wish I could do, which I've done in the past for other, seminars and classes, is just walk everyone through creating an account through ID.me. But I can't really do that because that would be committing fraud. I can't create a dummy account for a New York State identification system. So a lot of this is unfortunately, you're going to learn. I mean, it's the process tries to be straightforward, but the biggest issue I found is that, especially when using some of the options within ID.me's website to scan documents, a lot of it just doesn't work. That was why I mentioned, if you have the option to use both a laptop and a smartphone, or if the person if the person that you're helping does, I highly recommend it, because having the website, yes, I would. Well, depends. Sarah asked, is the website better than the app? If you're using it on a laptop, I would say the best thing to do is to use the website on a laptop with a webcam. Because in that case, you can upload documents from the computer. You can, rather than having to use the in-browser, even with the website, that'll have, if you're using it on a computer, it'll have an option to take photos using your smartphone. When you are asked to upload the documents, you'll have two links. One will say upload photos from device. The other will say send a link to my phone to take pictures. And if you send that link, it'll send like a little it'll send a link, which will have, first it'll have you verify the phone with a little code. And then it'll bring up a browser, not an actual app, but a browser app within the phone to take photos of the document in real time. And in my experience, using that in-browser app on your phone never works, or at least very rarely works. You will get it depending, no matter what the lighting is, no matter what angle you have, it just doesn't scan properly. And after several failed attempts, it'll automatically refer you to a live chat with someone who will, a live video call. And while those calls usually go very smoothly, they take forever to get a person online. So that's where that whole mess happens. So I would recommend if you have a laptop available with a camera and the ability to send pictures of the documents to that laptop, that is the most ideal setup. If you don't, however, then the smartphone is a possibility, but I'd recommend either scanning or taking a picture of the document ahead of time and then still using the upload option rather than the taking pictures in the heat of the moment. It's really messy. But what people will need definitely is some sort of device that has internet capabilities and a camera, because a facial scan is part of the ID.me process where they compare your picture with the picture that's on your photo ID. And if you don't have a camera like that, that's it. So if if you're at a library and or if you work with a library and you have technology available that has a camera, then you could have them use that, but otherwise they would have to acquire something. And I did have one person come in who had, all they had was a flip phone with a camera with no browser capabilities. So in that case, we had to use one of the library's laptops to help them. Do you have a private space in the library as you use to help people? Yes, we do. We have a couple of different meeting rooms. I usually just go off to the computer room. People will generally kind of need privacy as they are doing this. So if you have a space where people, I know a lot of libraries nowadays are creating telehealth spaces. I've seen a couple creating telehealth booths where people can go in, they have a laptop, computer, and they can do telehealth meetings there with privacy. That would be ideal if they can do that. But again, chances are they're also gonna need help. So if you can go to a place where both you and that person can go, that's probably the best thing that you can do. But otherwise I would say just try to go to a part of the library where they can have the most privacy. But yes, in our case, we do have a private space, but if you don't have one, I would just say try to create one, because you are working with sensitive documents, which people are probably not going to want to have other people see. So, any other questions or any other stories that people have having gone through this process or other issues that have arisen that we want to talk about and try to cover and iron out? Just as a reprise, we are recording this, so if you want to go back and access the recording, we'll have this on the Hoag Library's YouTube page. I'm going to email that link out to everybody once I have this uploaded. But if you have any questions just individually about ID&me, feel free to call. You can call Hoag Library. Our phone number is 585-589-4246, or you can shoot me an email. Oh, how many people have I helped is a question that I just got. I believe I've helped 6 people now total with ID&me. 4 while I've been a partner of the Orleans Digital Literacy Initiative, but 6 in total, because we have had, this has been in effect, I believe, since last year, later last year. So we've had quite a few people being like, I don't know what the heck this thing is. In some cases, it's been easy peasy, goes by really quickly, just help them like that. In other cases, we've had to meet with per person multiple times because they couldn't get it done the first time, or it's just, we have one session where it took forever. Usually because they end up being forced to do the video chat, which again, just trying to wait for that is a Herculean task in itself. Any other questions? No? Well, I hope people found this helpful. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to type my email in the chat. It's mmagnuson@ny.gov. If you have a problem that you run into and you can't seem to find help with the official support channels through either ID.me or New York State, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll see if I can figure it out. And it might even be something that I've had to iron out myself. But chances are especially if you're working with a library or if you're an ODLI mentor, you're going to find somebody who's going to need help with this. It's not the most fun, but it's our current reality, and it's something that we're going to have to live with, at least for the moment. So I'm hoping that they'll be able to iron out more of these issues over time. But as long as there's people who are not great with technology, there's people that are going to need your help. So they need all of our help. So thanks for coming today, and good luck.
Mike, thank you so much. Thanks.
no
Thank you,
problem.
Mike.
Again, thanks for having Katie. Thanks for setting this up today. Thank you all for joining me and joining us. Again, I'm glad to be able to share this information and to help whoever I can, because again, we got kind of thrown into it. And a lot of, just like all the other libraries, like no one told us that they were going to start directing people to libraries for help with ID.me, but I had at least like 4 of the people that I have talked to are like, well, they said to come to the library. And I was like,
Yes.
oh, okay, I guess so. Which I think is a case that, especially with various New York State branches, are kind of doing. I think we've had at least one person come over needing assistance with taxes that they're like, yeah, just go to the library. I'm like, we're not a volunteer income tax assistance library. So just, be careful and be aware, but feel free to shoot me an email. Again, mmagnuson@ny.gov, and good luck. And thanks again for coming. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.